Hello and welcome again to the teaching ministry of the Sunday School Department of First Baptist Church, Mineral Wells, Texas. Glad to have you join us today. Today we're going to be doing the Sunday School lesson that we would plan for Sunday, March 29th. I'm going to begin in a moment in Luke chapter 20, verse 45, and then we'll go over into Luke chapter 21, verses 1 through 4. And today we'll be talking about being generous with your money. And of course, this may turn some of you off because there's all kinds of criticisms about the church talking about money, but there are certain things that we have to have money for the church to run. But more importantly, God wants your heart. But now, look here at what we're seeing beginning in Luke chapter 20. It says, "And in the hearing of all the people, he said to his disciples, 'Beware of the scribes who like to walk around in long robes and love greetings in the marketplaces and the best seats in the synagogues and the places of honor at feasts, who devour widows' houses and for a pretense make long prayers. They will receive the greater condemnation.'" What does this say about the character of the scribes or the religious leaders in Jerusalem in the first century when Jesus was there? Among other things, it says they liked to put on a show. They loved to walk around in long robes. They loved being greeted with honor in the marketplace. They liked the best seat in the synagogue, or today we might say the best seat in the church. They always loved going to feasts and being put at the front of the room, and they would make long prayers for show. But among other things it says is they devoured widows' houses. They would take advantage of those who were helpless. In our day and time they might say, well, this is just business. But it's not just business, because we're talking about the most helpless people in first century society in Jerusalem. These are the people that had no husbands or sons or daughters to take care of them. They had no way of making a living. And so sometimes they had to beg. And Jesus says, for these who are most helpless, to take advantage of them is a much greater condemnation than anything else. We find when we go into chapter 21 of Luke, the first 4 verses, then it says, "Jesus looked up and saw the rich putting their gifts into the offering box. And he saw a poor widow put in 2 small copper coins. And he said, 'Truly I tell you, this poor widow who has put in more than all of them, for they all contributed out of their abundance, but she out of her poverty put in all she had to live on.'" The temple in Jerusalem, offering time, where in most churches these days, usually there's an offering plate and a time when the plates are passed in the pew and people put their money in. Of course, things are changing now. We're seeing more digital and online giving than we have in the past, and that may continue to increase in the future. But what would happen then was there'd be boxes around the temple, and there'd be a cone-shaped top on it, and when the money went in, it would make noise. And so Jesus comes to the temple, and instead of going and looking at the fixtures or looking at everything else, he decides to sit down and watch people put in their money. Now, can you imagine a stranger thing to do? Except in that day and time, the very rich would bring lots of coins and throw them in there, and it would make all kinds of noise. As a matter of fact, it's where we get the term sounding the trumpet, because of the trumpet shape or cone shape of the metal receptacle where the money went in. It's also where we get the term these days for toot your own horn. Jesus watches, and this one widow comes. She comes, and it says she puts in all that she has. 2 small coins. The 2 coins together are worth about 1/10 of a penny in our day and time. She put in all she had, and Jesus looks at the value of her gift, And he doesn't look at it in terms of monetary value. He doesn't look at it in terms of what the offering can buy, because if he did, he would say, great that we've got all these rich people that can support the work of God here in the temple. No. He looks at a widow who gives everything she has, which also means she probably doesn't know where her next meal is going to come from. She's outcast, she's looked down upon, she's not seen as valuable. She may have even wondered in the back of her mind, does God really care about me? I'm a widow. I have no support. I have no job. And she may have even wondered about all the people that gave so much, but she wanted to give something. We all commonly call it the widow's mite if you're a favorite of the King James Version. But she comes and she gives. So I got to ask you, who are like the widows in today's society and in our churches? Who are those people? Who are those people that don't have anybody left to take care of them? It can be the widow who's may have never had any children and her husband is gone. Or it could be the widow that had children and the children have preceded her in death. In our society and in our churches. It could include single parents. It could include people unable to find work. It could include immigrants. People that just are having trouble understanding this culture if they've come from another country. So my next question is, how can we avoid being like the scribes in Jerusalem who looked down on the helpless and were arrogant? Think about this. Because of this and the way Jesus criticized them, he said that she gives a greater gift. Look at the end at verse 4. It says, for they all contributed out of their abundance, but she out of her poverty put in all she had to live on. The widow came to the temple and she was all in. She was committed to the cause of God. Her money was where her faith was. Some people have said if you really want to know what's a priority for a person, look at their checkbook register. Or in our day and time, since most of us don't write that many checks, take a look at your electronic bank statement and see where the money goes. That's where your heart really is. There's certain things that when the income goes down, you have a hard time letting go of. And all of us at one time or another have had a drop in income. We find here that they've bragged too much. And giving is not about making a show of things. Service is not about making a show of things. Giving is service to God, but not in a way that draws attention. We find sometimes we love our money too much, we love our possessions too much. How many of you could go without television, or worse yet, without the internet these days, without being able to stream movies? Those of you who are watching this are using the internet, so you might already be hooked on electronics. But can you imagine giving up something for God's sake? One other place we want to look is in 1 Timothy 6. These few words, some of these are familiar with you. I'm going to begin at verse 6. But godliness with contentment is great gain, for we brought nothing into the world, and we cannot take anything out of the world. But if we have food and clothing, with these we will be content. But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation, into a snare, into many into many senseless and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. It is through this craving that some have wandered away from the faith and have pierced themselves with many pangs. Godliness with contentment is great gain. One of our problems in our society today, and it may be your problem, is you're always wanting more. You haven't learned to be content. The company I work for used to always say, "What is your ambition? What do you want to do next?" And I said, I'm content. That doesn't mean I'm complacent, but I'm content with what I do. But I still want to work hard. And I still want to honor my Heavenly Father in the way I work. Godliness with contentment is great gain. Getting more stuff, having more stuff, being stingy doesn't make you content. It can make you miserable. At the end of verse 10, it says here, many have wandered from the faith and have pierced themselves with many pangs, many miseries. Remember that if you're rich, it's easy to fall into a trap. One person told me one time, there are two challenges to your faith and your character. One is adversity. When things go bad, how do you respond to those things that you didn't expect that are an inconvenience at the very least? And this month, we're experiencing great inconvenience. How we're doing church. But also prosperity can be a distraction because all of a sudden you have all this stuff. And then when you didn't used to worry about money before, you think about, what if I spend this amount of money because I've had less when you have much more? It says, it doesn't say money is a root of all kinds of evil here. It says the love of money. Folks, it's not a sin to have money, but it is a sin to worship your money. It's a sin to worship your kids or live for your kids. It's a sin to worship sports. Sports are okay. I'm not a sports person. I may be the only man in America that's not a sports person. But I don't live for sports. I appreciate when I hear things that are going on with sports teams that have done well. I love hearing the stories of character of people that play sports. But sports alone is not enough to be an idol for me. Let's look at verses 17 through 19 of 1 Timothy 6. It says, "As for the rich in this present age, charge them not to be haughty, nor to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on God, who richly provides us with everything to enjoy. They are to do good, to be rich in good works, to be generous and ready to share, thus storing up treasure for themselves as a good fountain for the future, so that they may take hold of that which is truly life." To do what? Store up treasure for themselves in heaven. Jesus said in Matthew 6, store up yourselves, put your treasure somewhere not where moth and rust can steal and destroy, but where build up your treasures in heaven where nothing can destroy it. Take what you have, take your life, first of all, in your heart. Invest it in the kingdom of God. And that is more about your life and your heart and your lifestyle and your availability than it is about how much money is in your bank account or how much money you have or how much debt you have. Take hold of that which is truly life, how you live. And that affects every area of your life. There's a practical attitude here to remember that just as many of you have heard the phrase, by grace you've been saved through faith, grace means you didn't deserve it, but you got it anyhow. I experience God's grace every day. I have things in my life that are blessings that I don't deserve, but somehow God thought I deserved them. Think about that in the way you manage your money, in the way you give. And remember that talking about money or saying that the money needs to be given to the church as well as your time, your gifts, your skills is not a sin to talk about. And it is something that needs to happen. Thank you.